They told you that being single is a problem, that it's a phase you must escape from, a symptom of something broken in you. Yet, Epicurus, one of the most misunderstood philosophers in history, would have laughed in the face of that assumption. To him, solitude was not a punishment. It was a weapon, a sanctuary, a state where man, if wise, could truly flourish. Modern society conditions men to seek validation through others, through relationships, through status, through constant noise. But Epicurus knew something darker, something that cuts against the grain of the social machine. He taught that happiness is not found in excess or the chaos of attachments, but in freedom from disturbance, in mastering your desires rather than being mastered by them. The single man, unbound by emotional dependency, is the one closest to this ideal. He's not empty, he's free, he's not lonely, he's sovereign. While the world chases fleeting pleasures and burns out in endless dissatisfaction, the Epicurean man quietly builds an empire within. He learns to enjoy life's simple satisfactions, a meal, a moment of peace, a walk without obligation. His strength comes not from conquest, but from self-rule. The truth no one dares to say is this: most men in relationships are not fulfilled. They are distracted, they are softened, they are chained by expectations, emotional labor, and the subtle erosion of masculine edge. They are taught to feel guilty for seeking solitude, as if independence is selfish. But Epicurus never shamed men for walking alone. He encouraged it because he saw how attachment, unchecked, becomes the root of anxiety and misery. Love, in its common form, is desire distorted. It becomes a craving for what is not, for what might leave, for what cannot be controlled. But the single man who walks the Epicurean path does not chase that kind of suffering. He cultivates his mind, he trains his body, he sharpens his discipline, and while others are weakened by the ups and downs of emotional drama, he remains steady, rooted in himself. This is not about hating relationships, it's about refusing to be consumed by them. It's about seeing how often love is a socially reinforced illusion, one that distracts men from greatness. It feeds the ego but starves the spirit. And in the silence of solitude, the single man begins to hear the truth that noise always drowned out. Epicurus warned that the pursuit of pleasure must be wise, calculated, and most of all, free from dependency. The modern man who is alone by choice or by fate often discovers something unexpected: clarity, the space to think, the time to build, the will to transform. He stops performing for others. He stops negotiating his essence to be liked, loved, or accepted. He begins to ask, what do I want when no one is watching? That question is the gateway to power. Not the kind of power you flex, but the kind you carry in your calm, in your decisions, in the refusal to settle for mediocrity masked as comfort. Epicurus was not against pleasure. He simply knew that real pleasure comes from the absence of pain, and pain, more often than not, enters through the door of misguided attachments. The man who remains single long enough learns this in his bones. He sees how many men destroy their lives chasing women who do not respect them, sacrificing their dreams for validation that never lasts. But he doesn't. He learns to delay gratification, to find satisfaction in mastery, not in consumption. To thrive as a single man is not merely to endure, it is to conquer from within. While others measure life in milestones imposed by society, marriage, children, career status, the Epicurean man measures his life by inner stability, clarity of purpose, and freedom of action. He sees the game and refuses to play it blind. He may one day choose love, but he will never be a slave to it. He may find partnership, but not out of fear of being alone, because he has faced that fear and emerged stronger. He has walked through the silence and discovered his voice. He has embraced the stillness and found strategy. He is not in exile, he is in training. And when he steps out into the world, he does so with a presence that unsettles, a presence that makes others wonder where his power comes from. The truth is, it comes from saying no. No to the noise, no to the expectations, no to the lies that weakness is kindness and silence is shame. He has redefined what it means to live well, and that definition starts with self-respect, forged in solitude. Epicurus was not soft. He was not the hedonist modern thinkers paint him to be. His was a brutal honesty about human nature and the traps we willingly fall into. He saw how people destroy their peace chasing what they think they want, never stopping to question where those desires came from. But the single man who dares to think, who dares to step back, starts to break those illusions. He no longer needs to impress. He no longer begs for affection. He chooses. And in that choosing, he becomes dangerous. Because a man who needs nothing cannot be controlled. A man who is content with little can't be bought, broken, or bribed. He has nothing to prove and everything to gain. And so while others chase status and romance like addicts, he walks the path of quiet dominance, building, learning, waiting, watching. He knows the power of patience, the power of walking away, and most of all, the power of being alone without being lost. In the end, this is the dark truth. Single men thrive not in spite of their solitude, but because of it. Society fears that, because it cannot manipulate what it does not understand. And Epicurus gave them the blueprint for escaping the trap, not by preaching rebellion, but by embodying it, not by shouting, but by mastering the art of silence. And the silence, for the Epicurean man, is not empty. It's a forge. It's where the mind becomes sharper, the purpose becomes clearer, and the soul, once drowned in social noise, begins to breathe. Men who live alone and think deeply are often feared, not because they are dangerous in the traditional sense, but because they cannot be swayed. Their center is internal. Their validation is self-supplied. They are not chasing, they are choosing. And the world, which depends on emotional instability to sell dreams and products and relationships, has no leverage over a man who's no longer chasing what others crave. The marketplace of desire collapses in front of him because his attention is too expensive to be bought, his time too valuable to waste on shallow interactions. He operates on a different frequency, one that makes him invisible to the desperate but magnetic to the powerful. Epicurus believed the good life is one of calculated pleasure, of freedom from unnecessary pain. And the modern single man, when guided by this philosophy, does not descend into bitterness or apathy. He refines his instincts. He sees through the illusions of romantic fantasy, understanding that much of what is sold as love is merely a transaction. Comfort for freedom, security for vitality, attention for self-abandonment. He refuses the trade, not because he cannot get it, but because he understands the price. And the more time he spends walking alone, the more immune he becomes to emotional manipulation. He is no longer a boy needing to be mothered by his partner. He is a man, grounded, aware, selective. His standards rise, his circle tightens, his vision becomes laser-focused. This is not a man society can easily exploit. He doesn't seek to fit in, so he cannot be pressured to conform. He doesn't fear being alone, so he cannot be blackmailed with abandonment. He doesn't rely on attention, so he's not addicted to approval. He can walk away from anything because his foundation is internal, not external. Epicurus taught that the wise man will be content with little because he knows what truly matters. And in this truth lies immense strength. The single man becomes a builder, not just of things but of himself. He trains in silence while others boast loudly. He studies while others scroll. He sharpens his craft while others chase validation. And in time, he becomes undeniable. Not because he shouted, but because he became. People often mistake his solitude for sadness. They look at him and project their own discomfort with stillness, their own fears of irrelevance. But he smiles, not arrogantly but with quiet amusement, because he knows they do not understand the game he is playing. He is not hiding, he is preparing. And when he emerges, he will not be the same man who once questioned his worth. He will have turned loneliness into strength, rejection into direction, and peace into power. Epicurus whispered this ancient wisdom: to be rich is not to have much, but to need little. The single man who lives by this creed is the most dangerous kind of man, unshakable, because he is no longer begging the world to fill his emptiness. He's filled it himself. He may live quietly, but his presence echoes. He walks into rooms with a different posture, not puffed with ego, but lit from within by purpose. Women notice, Not because he tries to impress, but because he doesn't need to. Other men feel it too, the contrast between forced confidence and earned calm. He doesn't posture, he doesn't react, he observes. And when he speaks, people listen, not because he's loud, but because he's rare. This is the man Epicurus hinted at, the one who escapes the storm by not stepping into it in the first place, the one who thrives, not in spite of being alone, but because he learned how to be alone, comfortably, powerfully, fearlessly. While the world spins in chaos, while men rush into partnerships to avoid facing themselves, while attention is the new currency and people drown in shallow connections, the Epicurean man stands apart. Not above, but apart. Free. And that freedom, born of solitude, refined by thought and guarded by discipline, becomes the foundation of a life no one can take from him. He doesn't brag about being single. He doesn't need to. His life speaks for itself, peaceful, purposeful, powerful. And in that life, he finds a joy most will never taste, the joy of being whole, without needing to be completed. The joy of thriving on your own terms. The joy of walking your path, even if no one else walks with you. Because in the end, this is the truth Epicurus left behind. Not soft, not naive, but hard-earned and liberating. The man who can master solitude masters himself. And the man who masters himself masters everything. And as time passes, the Epicurean man begins to see more clearly the difference between what he was taught to want and what he actually wants. He recognizes how deeply the world manipulates men to feel incomplete without a partner, how the romantic ideal has been weaponized to keep men in a cycle of pursuit, sacrifice, and dependency. From childhood, he was told to be a provider, to be strong but emotionally available, to work hard so that someone else could feel secure beside him. But no one told him that in doing so, he might abandon himself. No one warned him that pleasing others would so often require him to silence his own truth. Epicurus never bought into that lie. He urged men to seek peace, not applause, to avoid pain, not chase status. And the single man who awakens to this reality begins to understand that being alone is not a weakness to be cured. It's a power to be cultivated. He watches other men implode under the weight of relationships they entered out of fear, obligation, or delusion. He sees their energy drained by emotional volatility, their minds clouded by the need to constantly manage someone else's perception of them, and he chooses differently. He begins to ask deeper questions. What is my time truly worth? Who deserves access to my energy? What dreams have I delayed in the name of connection? These questions are not bitter, they are surgical. They cut through the noise. They force a man to confront the brutal truth that many of the life paths men are encouraged to follow are designed to tame them, not liberate them. And so the Epicurean man rebels, not with rage but with stillness, not with destruction but with detachment. He lets go of the need to be understood, the need to be constantly seen, the need to be chosen, because he has already chosen himself. And when a man chooses himself deeply, fully, without apology, he becomes incredibly rare. He is no longer ruled by biology, by the instinct to reproduce or impress. He acknowledges those drives, but he does not let them dictate his actions. He is not celibate out of fear or repression, but out of clarity. He knows when to say yes, but more importantly, he knows when to say no. He does not chase beauty. He respects it. He does not seek attention. He attracts it through presence, not performance. And when women do enter his life, they feel something unfamiliar. An absence of neediness, a presence that doesn't cling. A man who listens but doesn't seek to be saved. He is whole. He is calm. He is not reacting. He is choosing. This makes him profoundly attractive, but he is immune to flattery. He knows that validation is a drug and he has detoxed. He knows that comfort is a trap and he has escaped it. While others look for someone to complete them, he has become complete on his own. And that completeness terrifies those who rely on emotional chaos to feel significant. The Epicurean man does not need to win arguments, because he doesn't need to prove himself. He doesn't need to dominate others because he already dominates himself. His discipline is quiet, his resolve is steel. He may look like an ordinary man, but inside he is a fortress. Society is not built for men like this. It wants them domesticated, compliant, addicted. It offers them quick pleasures in exchange for long-term control. But the Epicurean man says, no, not because he's angry, but because he's awake. He sees the game. He sees how relationships are often used to pacify masculine energy, to convert warriors into caregivers, to replace purpose with obligation. He doesn't hate women. On the contrary, he respects them too much to enter relationships built on illusion. He would rather walk alone in truth than walk with someone in a lie, and if love comes to him, it must come without chains, without performance, without the expectation that he abandon who he is to be loved. He is not bitter, he is not cold, he is clear, and in that clarity, he is unstoppable. His life becomes a canvas for mastery, not compromise. He builds, not to impress, but to express. He creates, not to be praised, but because creation is sacred. He wakes up with purpose, not panic. He sleeps with peace, not regret. He is no longer distracted by drama or seduced by fantasy. He lives by the quiet code of a man who has faced himself and won. And when storms come, he does not crumble. He smiles. Because he has trained for this, he has chosen the harder road, the lonelier path, the deeper truth. And that choice has made him unbreakable. In the end, Epicurus didn't offer a religion. He offered liberation. And the man who understands this finds a kind of joy that few will ever taste, the joy of self-possession, the joy of living without compromise, the joy of walking forward with nothing to prove and everything to create. This is the dark truth about why single men thrive. Because once they stop chasing what the world told them they needed, they discover what they were truly meant to become. Not half of a whole, but a complete, quiet storm. And the longer this man walks his solitary path, the more he begins to see how deep the conditioning runs, not just in others but in himself. He remembers the years spent chasing affection, the sleepless nights over words not returned, the quiet self-betrayals made in the name of being accepted. He remembers how he once mistook compromise for love, silence for peace, and comfort for connection. But with each year of solitude, those illusions dissolve, not through bitterness but through brutal clarity. He sees how often relationships were built not on truth but on fear. Fear of being alone, of being forgotten, of not being good enough without someone else's approval. And that realization is like fire. It burns, but it purifies. It reveals the difference between needing someone and choosing someone. And he knows that until a man can walk in complete solitude without anxiety, he is not ready to walk beside anyone. His mind sharpens as he clears out the noise. The opinions of others become irrelevant. Their judgments do not move him. Their praise does not inflate him. He no longer lives by borrowed expectations. His decisions are not made to appease a partner, impress a peer, or mimic a trend. They come from deep stillness, from inner alignment, from a sense of knowing that cannot be taught, only earned. And this knowledge makes him efficient. He doesn't waste time chasing what does not serve him. He doesn't argue over things that do not matter. He doesn't cling to people who cannot meet him where he is. He lets go quickly, he moves forward quietly, because he has trained himself to value peace over attention, purpose over distraction, solitude over shallow connection. And while others scroll endlessly, trying to fill the void with novelty, he dives deeper into himself. He reads, he trains, he thinks. His solitude becomes sacred, not because he is hiding from life, but because he is preparing for it on his own terms. He builds routines that sharpen him, mornings of discipline, evenings of reflection. He learns to find meaning in simplicity, a strong body, a focused mind, a clean space, a clear goal. He doesn't need to be saved. He doesn't need to be fixed. And because of that, he is no longer looking for someone to save or fix. His relationships, when they exist, are clean. They are not built on codependency or drama. They are not rushed or forced. He connects only when it is real, and he walks away the moment it isn't. This kind of man intimidates many, not because he's cruel, but because he's sovereign. He has nothing to hide behind, no role to play, no mask to maintain. He does not flirt to feel desired. He does not entertain conversations that don't nourish his spirit. He respects his own energy too much. He has become allergic to anything. Fake smiles, fake friendships, fake love. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, his words carry weight, because they are not meant to impress, but to express. He no longer needs permission to be himself, and this, more than anything, is what makes him thrive. Epicurus understood that real power lies in restraint, not indulgence. The man who can say no to empty pleasure, who can walk away from situations that weaken him, who can sit in stillness while others scream for stimulation, that is the man who holds true strength. And the modern single man, if he walks this path, long enough becomes that man, a quiet force, not chasing glory, but becoming the kind of man who creates it without needing applause. His life does not look flashy from the outside, but from the inside, it is built like a fortress. It is intentional. Every hour is chosen, every relationship is evaluated, every habit is designed, and over time this design becomes destiny. He begins to see himself not just as someone surviving the world, but as someone shaping it. His solitude is no longer a reaction to disappointment. It is a deliberate space for transformation. He refines his values. He builds his body. He studies psychology, strategy, philosophy. He watches not just how people act, but why, and in doing so he gains an edge that cannot be taught in schools or learned from influencers. It is the edge of self-knowledge, of emotional mastery, of not needing and therefore being in control. This is not a man who is easy to manipulate. He sees games before they start. He hears the lie behind the compliment. He notices the weakness in a loud voice. And he stays calm, because he no longer needs to react. He is not a puppet. He is the hand. And the more grounded he becomes, the more magnetic his presence, not because he seeks attention, but because groundedness itself is rare. In a world addicted to performance, authenticity is rebellion. He becomes the kind of man other men respect in silence, even if they don't understand him. The kind women wonder about, even if they can't control him. He doesn't post his strength, he lives it. He doesn't demand respect, he commands it, through action, not words, through consistency, not charisma, through solitude, not noise. So let them call him a loner. Let them say he's too intense, too quiet, too distant. He does not mind, because he knows where he's going. He knows what he's building. And he knows that most people would rather criticize a man who walks alone than question why they never had the courage to do the same. The Epicurean man doesn't argue with them. He simply keeps walking, silent, focused, free, because in that silence, in that chosen solitude, he has found something priceless, himself. And once a man truly finds himself, the world can never take him back. And with every year that passes, in solitude his power compounds. While others age in reaction to life, he evolves by design. There is no midlife crisis waiting for him. He dismantled the illusions that lead to 1 year ago. He does not wake up in panic, wondering if he made the right choices. He has tested himself in silence, burned away the false identities, and emerged forged in self-honesty. The modern Epicurean man thrives not because life gives him everything, but because he needs so little to feel full. And in that freedom from need, he becomes dangerous in the best way. He cannot be bribed, bought, or broken. He watches the world chase highs, relationships, promotions, fame, dopamine hits masked as goals. But he's not chasing. He's choosing. Every step he takes is intentional. He is not rushing to a destination. He is refining the path itself. While others drown in endless stimulation, he cultivates boredom into insight. While others fear being alone with their thoughts, he studies his own mind like a map to mastery. He understands that most men never become powerful, not because they don't have potential, but because they never sit long enough with their pain to uncover what it's teaching them. He does, and in that pain, he finds raw material, fuel, focus. He learns that rejection was redirection, that heartbreak was a mirror, that failure was training, and so his solitude becomes alchemical. It transforms suffering into wisdom. Each memory that once brought shame now carries clarity. Each scar now speaks of survival. He no longer wishes for a lighter load. He has simply built stronger shoulders. And this makes him a threat to a society built on escapism, distraction, and dependency. Because when a man stops running from himself, he becomes the kind of force others can't predict. He is no longer reactive. He is sovereign. And it's in this sovereignty that he begins to shape his own code. He lives by principles, not impulses. He practices discipline, not as punishment, but as liberation. He understands that freedom is not doing whatever you want, but having the strength to do what's right even when it's hard. He does not sacrifice his future for momentary comfort. He wakes early, trains with intention, studies with hunger, and rests with a clear conscience. His life is not a performance for the outside world. It's a mission, invisible to most, sacred to him. Even when temptation arrives, he doesn't fold. He's not swayed by softness wrapped in seduction. He sees the trap behind the smile, the emotional cost behind the beauty, the long-term drain behind the short-term thrill, and not out of fear, out of clarity. He knows what it would cost to invite chaos into his life again. He's tasted peace, and nothing else compares. And so he protects it, not with walls, but with standards, not with fear, but with filters. He lets few people in, but those who earn it feel a presence they've rarely encountered. A man who is whole before they arrived and will remain whole if they leave. He doesn't project his wounds. He's healed them. He doesn't beg to be seen. He sees himself. And because of that, he does not need loyalty bought through fear or guilt. He attracts those who want to walk beside him, not to complete him, not to fix him, but to share the view from where he stands. High ground, earned ground, built brick by brick in solitude, in silence, in self-confrontation. His victories are not loud, but they are permanent. His growth is not obvious, but it is unstoppable. And when others question why he's still single, he does not explain. He lets the results of his life speak. He is not behind, he is ahead in ways the world cannot yet measure. The investments he's made in his mind, body, and soul compound quietly. But when they emerge, they do so with undeniable force. He becomes the kind of man people turn to when the lights go out, when the illusions fail, when false strength crumbles. Because he's been building in the dark. He's been sharpening while others coasted. He's been becoming. This is the dark truth Epicurus hinted at, that the good life is not in the excesses of pleasure, but in the mastery of simplicity. That happiness is not the absence of problems, but the presence of purpose. And the single man who once feared silence now defends it like a fortress. He thrives not because he has everything, but because he needs so little. And in a world addicted to more, the man who thrives with less becomes a paradox, a mystery. A quiet rebellion. Let them misunderstand him. Let them mock him. He does not flinch. Because in his solitude he has found the one thing every man is secretly searching for, himself, fully, finally. And no one can take that from him. And as this man continues walking the path of solitude, a strange shift begins to occur. The very things he once thought he needed begin to chase him. Attention, validation, affection, opportunities. They come not because he begs for them, but because he's become a gravitational force. There is something unshakable about a man who doesn't flinch, who doesn't over-explain, who doesn't shrink to be liked. The world senses it. People feel it. He walks into a room and doesn't seek the spotlight, yet it bends toward him, not because he demands it, but because his presence holds weight, anchored in self-respect, refined through discipline, and immune to the games that enslave weaker minds. He no longer debates his worth. He no longer seeks to be chosen. He knows that to be chosen by someone who cannot even choose themselves is a burden, not a blessing. He waits for no one. He compares himself to no one. His race is internal, his scoreboard invisible. He measures his days not by applause or outcomes, but by integrity. Did I move with clarity today? Did I speak only what was true? Did I resist? What was easy to honor what is necessary? These become his standards. And when he meets them, even in silence, he sleeps like a king. What used to trigger him now reveals the growth he's undergone. Where once he might have reacted, defended, chased, explained, he now smiles quietly, uninterested in emotional chaos. Where once the silence of being alone would have terrified him, now it soothes him like a familiar song. It is in this silence that his mind sharpens. He reads more deeply, thinks more critically. He no longer consumes passively. Every book, every idea, every conversation, filtered, strategic, aligned. He is no longer distracted by entertainment. He is entertained by his own evolution. And this man, though he walks alone, is not lonely. Because loneliness is the absence of connection, but he has built the deepest connection possible with himself. He has learned to sit in the rawness of emotion without drowning, to feel deeply without being ruled by what he feels. And so when others seek constant reassurance or distraction, he remains rooted, grounded, focused. Because while the world spirals in panic, he prepares. While others numb their discomfort, he listens to what it's teaching. And that is why he thrives, not in spite of being single, but because of it. He looks back now and sees the world differently. He sees how young men are led blindly into relationships before they've learned who they are. He sees how society rewards emotional servitude disguised as love. How the masculine edge is dulled by expectations to please at all costs. And he mourns for those still caught in that trap, not with pity but with resolve. He becomes an example, not through preaching but through embodiment. He shows what's possible when a man stops outsourcing his identity, when he stops living to be accepted and starts living in alignment. And as he sharpens this alignment, something radical happens. He becomes whole, not in theory, but in action. His words match his values. His choices match his goals. His life becomes a system of truth. And when the world offers shortcuts, false intimacy, easy fame, shallow pleasures, he says no with a calm that shakes people. Because they expect resistance, but he gives clarity. They expect argument, but he gives absence. He is not interested in proving his path. He's too busy walking it. Eventually, some will return to him. People who left, people who didn't understand. They come back not because he chased them, but because they can no longer ignore what he's become. Some will want to reconnect. Some will want access again. But he is not a man who forgets the lessons his solitude taught him. Forgiveness. Yes, access, no. His standards are not built on emotion, they are built on evolution. And not everyone is allowed to walk beside the man he has become. He doesn't resent the world. He simply outgrows it. And that is perhaps the most terrifying part of his truth, that he no longer fights to belong. He belongs only to himself. And that kind of man can no longer be caged, not by a relationship, not by social pressure, not by expectations. He is free, and not the kind of freedom sold by marketing or promised by money, but the kind that comes from staring into the abyss of who he once was and refusing to go back. Epicurus's dark truth was never about isolation. It was about intentional detachment from anything that robs a man of peace. He understood that pleasure without wisdom is a prison, and the modern man who truly embraces this lives differently. He smiles at chaos because he knows it can't touch him. He walks through temptation untouched because he has mastered himself. He creates, builds, learns, moves, not for a crowd, not for approval, but for the quiet, unwavering satisfaction of knowing he is in command of his destiny. This is why single men, the ones who choose it and grow within it, thrive, because they are no longer pretending, no longer sedated, no longer enslaved by their own biology or by the fantasies society sells them. They are awake, focused, alive. And they are coming, not to follow but to lead, not to conform but to create, not to please but to build a world that reflects the power of a man who has mastered himself. He no longer fears the passing of time because he knows that while others age without direction, he evolves with intention. The wrinkles that begin to show on his face are not marks of decline, but carvings of discipline, evidence of countless days spent in the quiet labor of becoming. He doesn't measure life by how quickly he can achieve, but by how deeply he can understand. There is no rush because he is not chasing anything that's running from him. What's meant for him, he draws in with silence. What isn't, he releases, without resistance. When he looks at the lives of men trapped in cycles of emotional chaos, men who enter relationships to escape themselves, only to find a louder emptiness, he feels no superiority, only understanding. He's been there. He's felt that ache. But the difference is he didn't run from it, he faced it. He sat in the pain until it taught him everything he needed to know, about who he was, about what he believed, about what he would never tolerate again. And that decision to face instead of flee is what began to separate him from the masses. He sees now that most people are not living, they are reacting, drifting through their days, dictated by fear, by need, by the expectations of others. They move from one relationship to the next without ever asking why, without ever pausing to ask, what kind of man do I want to be? Am I living according to my own values or someone else's script? These are questions most avoid, but not him. He wrestled with them, and it was in that wrestling that he found clarity, and clarity, once found, becomes a compass more powerful than desire. Even his desires have changed. He no longer seeks to be desired, he seeks to be respected, not just by others, but by the man in the mirror. He wants to be someone his younger self would look up to, and his future self would thank. That becomes his guiding force, and it shows in how he walks, how he speaks, how he chooses. He turns down offers others would kill for, not because he doesn't appreciate them, but because they are not aligned. He would rather walk alone in truth than be surrounded in comfort built on lies, and that integrity becomes his silent crown. He sees the games others play, the performative masculinity, the fake humility, the desperate flirtation masked as confidence. He doesn't judge. It's just not his language anymore. He's grown past the need to be seen a certain way. He doesn't need to posture or prove. His presence is the result of 1,000 private battles no one saw and no one applauded. And because of that, he doesn't seek applause. He seeks only to remain in alignment with his values, his purpose, his path. When he finally does allow someone into his life, it's not out of loneliness but clarity. He chooses from abundance, not lack, from vision, not need. And so he doesn't fall for chaos dressed in beauty or manipulation disguised as passion. He sees through it. He's not impressed by words. He watches behavior. He's not moved by compliments. He watches consistency. He knows that true partnership begins only when both individuals are whole, and most people are still fragments looking for someone else to glue them together. He would rather be single forever than compromise the piece he built from nothing. And that's not a threat, that's a vow to never betray himself again, because he remembers the days he gave too much, the nights he stayed silent when he should have walked away, the times he tolerated less because he didn't know what more looked like. But he knows now. He's tasted more. And once a man knows his worth in solitude, no amount of company will make him forget it. So he builds, quietly, daily. His empire might not be made of gold, but of grit, vision, and unshakable principles. While others measure success in status and possessions, he measures it in peace, control, and alignment. He's not building a life that looks good. He's building one that feels powerful to live inside. And that makes him immune to trends, to pressures, to manipulation. Because once you've mastered yourself, the world can offer you nothing greater. Epicurus's wisdom wasn't about indulgence. It was about the art of discerning what truly matters, to remove the unnecessary, to find pleasure in what is simple, but real. The single man who thrives has done just that. He has stripped away the noise, confronted the illusions, and emerged as something rare in today's world, a man at peace, not because the world gave it to him, but because he created it from within. And so he walks, not ahead of others, not above them, but apart, in his own direction, guided by a compass few ever take the time to find. He will not be rushed. He will not be shaken. He will not be reshaped to fit into a life that was never designed for him. He is no longer available for anything that costs his peace, his focus, or his dignity. Because he knows now, the greatest form of power is not dominance, it's sovereignty, and he owns himself completely. And as the seasons of his life pass, this man no longer resists change, he embraces it. He understands now that evolution is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a subtle shift in posture, a decision made without announcement, a new boundary drawn not out of bitterness, but out of deep self-respect. He becomes a sculptor, chiseling away every habit, person, or thought that no longer serves. The man he's becoming. And with each stroke, he gets closer to something sharper, purer, truer. While others chase novelty, he pursues depth. He doesn't need to impress with stories of adventure or chaos. His life itself is an adventure of discipline, a slow, steady climb toward excellence. Where others bounce between passions and distractions, he dives deep into mastery. He may speak less, but when he speaks, people listen. Not because he demands attention, but because his words carry the weight of experience, the authority of someone who sat with hard truths and emerged wiser, not broken. He is the man who can sit in a storm without losing his center, who can be surrounded by noise and still hear his own thoughts, who can be tempted by chaos but choose stillness. That kind of man doesn't need power over others. He holds power over himself, and that power, quiet and calm, begins to shift everything around him. People notice it without understanding it. They feel something unspoken, a gravity, a certainty, an energy that doesn't seek approval yet commands respect. He no longer seeks intensity for the sake of feeling alive. He understands that peace is not boring. It is the highest form of emotional wealth. And because of that, he filters everything. Who gets his time, what gets his energy, where he places his focus. He is not detached from the world. He is simply immune to its manipulation. He doesn't crave validation. He doesn't argue to be right. He doesn't chase people who are confused about him because he has made peace with being misunderstood. He has made peace with walking alone if that's what it takes to stay aligned. And ironically, in walking away from what most people chase, he becomes the very thing they desire. His silence becomes magnetic. His stability becomes rare. His decisiveness becomes attractive, not because he performs masculinity, but because he embodies it. Calm, strong, purposeful. This is not a man who reacts. This is a man who responds, who listens more than he speaks, who watches more than he assumes, who acts only when it's necessary, and when he does, it's deliberate, final, undeniable. The women who encounter him are often surprised. He doesn't play games. He doesn't flatter unnecessarily. He doesn't pursue endlessly. If anything, he evaluates, observes, watches how she treats herself, how she speaks of others, how she handles silence. And many cannot stand it, not because he is cruel, but because he refuses to feed illusions. He does not entertain chaos just to feel wanted. He does not offer emotional investment to someone who hasn't earned it. And this makes him rare, even intimidating, but above all, clear. He no longer lives in reaction to the past. The old wounds have been studied, felt, accepted, and released, not buried, healed. He has had conversations with the younger version of himself and forgiven him for not knowing better. He has looked his darkest moments in the face and honored them, not with shame, but with gratitude for the strength they built. And that is why he doesn't break easily, because he has already been broken and rebuilt himself stronger, smarter, more intentional. He is no longer afraid of being alone at night, no longer afraid of missing out, no longer afraid of what the world might think if he chooses solitude over surface-level connection, because now he knows solitude is not emptiness. It's presence, it's not punishment, it's preparation. And in that space he creates, learns, reflects, refines. He becomes dangerous in the best way, the kind of man who doesn't need the world, yet becomes irresistible to it. His success is not measured by numbers, but by control. Control of his time, his emotions, his values. He builds systems that work without constant struggle. He invests in himself not to flex, but to fortify. He knows that what's flashy today is forgotten tomorrow. But what's built in truth and discipline endures. He isn't here for momentary recognition. He's here for long-term impact. He leaves a legacy not through loud declarations, but through quiet consistency. Through the way he treats others even when no one is watching. Through the hard choices made when compromise would have been easier. Through the moments he chooses principle over comfort. That is how he thrives. That is how he becomes unforgettable. Not to everyone, but to those few who can see what he really is. A man who needed nothing outside of himself to become everything he is. And in that final realization, he understands the full weight of Epicurus's philosophy, that pleasure is not the endless pursuit of more, but the courageous choice of less, chosen with clarity. That fulfillment doesn't come from what you accumulate, but from what you release. That the man who can sit in silence with himself and feel no void has become the rarest and most dangerous kind of man, one who is truly, profoundly free.